All right, we are back with Vice President J.D. Vance. So we just mentioned the midterms. I want to just put up a poll. This shows congressional vote preference. This was at the end of January, so just a few weeks ago. Of all voters, Democratic candidate preference at 52, GOP candidate at 46. We've got a long way to go, but obviously that number would not be good for the majority.
That would not be good. I will say, as much as we love Fox News, we always think Fox News has the worst polling. Me and the president agree on that. I'm sorry.
I can show you other ones that are very similar, but since they're ours, I show ours.
But here's the fundamental issue in the midterms, and I think we're going to make this argument to the American people, and the American people are obviously, they're going to be the ones who make this decision, is look, if you go back to the Biden administration, the average American lost about $3,000 in take-home pay during the 4 years that Democrats were in charge. In the first year of the Trump administration, average Americans have gained about $1,200. Now, there's kind of a good news, bad news dynamic there. If you're looking at it from the perspective of the last year, Americans have done better. If you're looking at it from the perspective of the Biden administration, we're still digging out of the hole the Democrats put us in. And I think that the question we're going to put to the American people is, do you want to give the government back over to the people who, frankly, burned down the House and made most Americans much less wealthy and much less safe? Or do you want to double down on the president's leadership, which has helped us recover from some of the problems caused by Joe Biden, and then has built a lot on top of it? Because so much of what we've done over the last year are things that are going to pay long-term dividends for the American people. $18 trillion of new investment. That's factories being built. That's wages going up. A 20% reduction in murder rate. We've obviously secured the border, and we've got a lot of criminals out of this country in the process. So there's a lot to run on. There's a lot to talk about. But, Martha, there's still so much to do. And I think it's up to us. It's up to me. It's up to the president. It's up to the entire team to make the argument to the American people that we've made your life better. And if you give us another couple of years of Republican governance, we can keep on building upon that record.
So your family is expanding. You're going to have a new child.
We are.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
In July. A lot of young families are having trouble buying a house.
Of course.
And I'm wondering if in the State of the Union, not to get ahead of the president's speech next week, but will we hear any sort of hard, incentives, a tax incentive, a program where if you're going to buy your first house, we're going to make your taxes lower, anything along those lines? Will we get that? Well,
the president's actually articulated a number of ways to make housing more affordable, especially for young Americans who want to start a family, want to raise that family in a house that they own. I think that's a critical part of the American dream. One of the president's proposals he came out with just a couple of weeks ago, actually, was to stop institutional institutional investors from buying homes that should go to American families and to American citizens. That's going to make housing more affordable. But the president has also driven home the most important thing that we can do to make housing more affordable is to actually lower interest rates. Right now, because of the Federal Reserve, we have interest rates that are still way too high, even though inflation has come down. Frankly, it's come down faster than people thought it would under the Trump administration, and yet the Federal Reserve is keeping interest rates stubbornly high. That means if you go and apply for a mortgage, you're paying much more for that mortgage than you should. So we're going to make it easier to build and create homes. We're going to make it easier for Americans rather than Wall Street to buy those homes. But we also need to get interest rates lower. That's a critical part of the president's agenda.
What do you say to people who say, well, I'm not sure I should have a third or a fourth child because it's too expensive?
Well, one, I hear them, and I know a lot of young American families are actually deciding not to have kids or delaying kids. I mean, look, what I would say is it's never a good time in the sense that it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be easy. I know as the father of three with a fourth on the way, there are always going to be challenges. But I don't know anybody who chose to have another kid who regretted it. Even sometimes if it was financially difficult, it often is. I think babies are a good thing, and I think if we have more of them in this country, the country will be much better.
Well, thanks for doing your part.
We're doing our part.
Thanks for doing your part.
And the second lady.
So on immigration, can you describe how it's going to look different now after the Minnesota surge? And is Tom Homan now leading this immigration push to try to remove more people who are here illegally?
Well, Tom Homan's always been a critical part of what we've done at the border and when it comes to immigration enforcement. What we've consistently said is that we want to deport violent criminals, people who came in under the Biden administration illegally, and get them out of our country so that Americans' wages can go up, so that American streets can be safer. Tom's been an important part of that, but of course, Kristi Noem's been an important part of that. Our DHS Secretary, Stephen Miller, at the White House has been an important part of that. Here's the thing, Martha, where you've had cooperation between the state, the local, and the federal government, whether it's a blue city like Memphis or a red city in a small town in the middle of Ohio, you have great cooperation and you don't have the chaos. We're able to get illegal aliens out of our country, and we're able to do it in an orderly way. Where you have Democrats refusing to cooperate, places like Minneapolis, places like Los Angeles, the entire immigration enforcement thing, it becomes more chaotic. It becomes harder to get the worst people out of our country. It's a nightmare for the American people. But unfortunately, the Democrats, at least some of them, some elected Democrats, are so committed to the idea that you shouldn't be able to deport anybody that they're willing to put at risk the lives of local police, the lives of federal law enforcement, to ensure that it's as hard as possible to enforce the border. We're going to keep on enforcing the border despite that, but man, it would be great to have a little bit more help from the local officials.
That the president didn't like the videos that he was seeing in Minnesota.
I don't think any of us liked the videos.
So are we not going to see that kind of surge in Los Angeles or New York, the other places that you mentioned?
Well, Martha, none of us like those videos. That's in fact, the point is we don't want immigration enforcement to be chaotic. In 99% of cases, you have a federal law enforcement officer. They show up at a jail or they show up somewhere else. They identify a person who needs to be deported, and they get him out of our country. That's how it should work. Where you have that chaos in Los Angeles and Minneapolis, it's because the local authorities are so committed to an open border that they want to put law enforcement at risk. We're not going to surrender to that. We're not going to submit to that. We're going to be deliberate. We're going to be smart. We're going to try to prevent these chaotic scenes that, of course, the Democrats use to political advantage. But we're going to keep on enforcing the border, Martha. That's the mandate the American people gave us.
So I want to ask you something about AI. I haven't heard you talk about this in recent interviews.
Sure.
And a couple of models came out that were a little scary this week. And even the head of Anthropic, who is usually pretty optimistic about how he sees it, doesn't see it as dangerous or scary, had this to say about these new models. Watch this.
Look, these, you can't just give instruction. I mean, we try, but you can't just, have these things do exactly what you want to do. They're more like growing a biological organism. But there is a science of how to control them. Like early in our training, these things are often unpredictable, and then we shape them. We address problems one by one.
So he said that in some cases, these models were deceptive, that they were able to produce blackmail and scheme against the user. These are raising a lot of questions, and I'm wondering, one piece this week said this is going to be like COVID, that we didn't see the early tea leaves and realize how bad it was. Is this the responsibility of the federal government, of the White House, to be out in front on this? And are you at all concerned that you're going to look back on this and say, we should have done more?
Well, we have some of the smartest people working in AI in the world who are advising the White House, some of them are actually working in the White House. The one thing I disagree with the clip that you showed is the CEO of Anthropic saying we have no control over this. I don't think that's entirely right. I think that the people who are developing these models, the people who own these companies, they do have certain control over it. They would like to deflect from that a little bit. But yeah, do I worry about AI? I worry about a number of things, Martha. I worry about companies using artificial intelligence to surveil Americans. I worry about invasions of privacy. I worry a lot about political bias. If you go back to 2020, 2021, Google search was so biased in a left-wing direction that I think it actually changed America's political system. I don't want that to happen with artificial intelligence. So there are a lot of things we are worried about. There are a lot of things that we're focused on at the White House. But right now, we think that the technology is developing in a way where we can create a lot of good prosperity for the American people. And right now, the White House is on top of it. But yes, we're going to stay on top of it. Should the states
regulate this, or should it come from the federal government? What do you think?
Well, look, I think fundamentally you're going to have one standard because these companies are so complicated, and what's happening in California affects what happens in Ohio and vice versa. I think that eventually you're going to have some standard applied, whether it's a federal standard or whether it's one state standard dominating. I think, frankly, the worst possible outcome would be to have far left California dominate the entire AI regulatory map. That is, unfortunately, what the Californians would like to happen. I think that we need need to be a little bit safer. There are a lot of pieces of legislation. Marsha Blackburn has a great piece of legislation about child safety online. There's a lot of other stuff. There's a lot of stuff that we've been working on, but we do need to be careful about this. But I think the Trump administration, at least, we're taking the right approach.
Okay. I know you have to go, but this is a very quick one. Eileen Gu is skiing for China. You were at the Olympics, at the Open. Enes Kanter has said she's a traitor. Some people have said that this is a treasonous to ski for China and to overlook Jimmy Lai and the Uyghurs and pretend like those things aren't problems is a huge problem. What do you think her status should be? Should it be changed?
Well, look, I'm not gonna. I have no idea what her status should be. I think that's ultimately up to the Olympics Committee. I won't pretend to wade into that. I certainly think that somebody who grew up in the United States of America, who benefited from our education system, from the freedoms and liberties that make this country a great place, I would hope that they want to compete with the United States of America. So I'm going to root for American athletes, and I think part of that is people who identify themselves as Americans. That's who I'm rooting for this Olympics.
I'm with you on that one. Thank you very much, Vice President J.D. Vance. Great to see you. Thank you for coming. We'll see you
Absolutely.
soon.
Take
See you
care.
at the State of the Union.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.